walk you through the process of creating an allocation config. So you can access the module to create the allocation config by going to allocations in the manage allocation config tab. You click new, provide a name to the allocation config, test. So the way our allocation config works is you can basically enable allocations for different products, and within each of the product you can keep adding different dispositions. So once you enter the details, the name and the description of the allocation config, you can click the plus add product, and then you can select which product to add. So here we're trying to create an oil config. You can select oil, then you can select which producing method do you want to use, whether it is well test or whether it is wellhead meter. I'll walk you through the process of creating a well test allocation config. In here, once you've selected well test allocation method, you have a option to select either a reading which is going to determine the downtime, or an event generated downtime. So I'll walk you through the process of creating a reading determined downtime. So in this case we use the common well reading, which is the common reading type which you already have enabled, and downtime is basically captured in this attribute. So once you have determined what is the well allocation method and what is the source of the reading of the downtime on the well, then you can choose to add a different disposition within the product oil. So to start off, we can actually add a disposition for production. So what this essentially tells is it helps the allocation engine identify what are the ratio sources for allocation, as well as what are the volume sources for oil production. So in the case of ratio source, if you notice, we will be able to, we know that we need to provide a ratio source, which is the well test at a well level. So you can select well test as a reading type, and we use 24-hour oil. In here we do have a capability of deciding whether you want to use a well test which is the last available one, or in cases where you have a well test through SCADA, through some kind of internal process which is determining the well test at every day level at a well, then you can actually decide whether you want a current date or a previous date well test or a last available well test. In the case of last available setting, the system automatically checks for the latest available well test up to the date of allocation. We also have the capability to validate a well test using any of the attributes, validation attributes, and we can determine which value you want to use. So once we have determined the ratios, the general sources for production disposition are basically either it could be an oil, a lac meter, whose gross oil volume could be used as the production disposition volume source. And similarly, in the case of tank, a dual phase oil water tank, you would see that the oil production number is used as a volume source. Once you've selected these, you can save the allocation config, and now this becomes the basis of a setting which determines which attributes on which objects act as volume sources and which attributes on which objects act as ratio sources. Thank you.